5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engines running. We have a liftoff. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
50 years ago, NASA sent astronauts to the moon. There it is, over there. No one on it, just a quick visit up and back, then a big parade, and they were famous for life. But over 800 years ago, my tupuna made a journey just as hard and just as amazing. Over 4,000 kilometers from here in West Polynesia, across the mighty Pacific to Aotearoa, a land they knew that was there. How? Birds. When you hang out on an island long enough without an iPad, you start to notice stuff. Like how the long-tailed Pacific cuckoo would travel south every spring. You watch them do this for 100 years. They go, they come back, they go, they come back, and then you start to think, there's land down south, I just need to find it. So if every spring you set sail on the same line as the cuckoo, you'll find that land that they're flying to. Who's brave enough and smart enough to do this? Maui and his mates. They sailed south, over the horizon, found Aotearoa, came back and told everyone. Anana, famous for life, astronaut of his time. One 120 years ago, two Pākehā, Goldie and Steele, made this painting. They called it The Arrival of the Māori in New Zealand, and it became famous, hanging in the Auckland Art Gallery for years. The Māoris? I'm Māori, but these aren't my ancestors. The painters made them up. They made up the waka too, and they copied the whole look of the painting from a French fella called Jericho. Look at how crazy hungry these exotic savages are. We're dead, we're dying. We're so lucky we stumbled upon land. Māori settlement of Aotearoa was no accident like the painting reckons. It was a choice based on knowledge. And it worked because we could navigate using the natural world and we had the waka to safely get us here. We watched migrating seabirds heading south and we sent our great explorer Maui and our great voyager Kupe to follow their path. They found this land and returned home to Hawaii with directions. Then a new wave of migration began. What this painting does tell us is that Europeans back then knew so little of our true awesomeness. Sadly, the more famous the painting got, the more people, even our own people, believed it to be true. I mean, looking at the painting, I kind of like some of the expressions. This guy over here looks like me when someone eats the last of my nuggets. No! But like a superhero movie, it's not real. What is real is that we were skilled enough to find this land and skilled enough to thrive here. We've got innovation in our DNA, we've got innovation bursting right out of us. That's our superpower. Da-da-da!
Today, if you were to Google map of human migration, then this is what you're likely to find. It's a journey that begins in Africa 65,000 years ago, and it covers the entire landmass of the world, except for here. Te Moana Nui a Kiwa, it's the largest body of open water on the planet, the Pacific Ocean. It's so large that you could put every continent into it with room to spare. It's even bigger than Mars. And yet this incredible story of human migration across this enormous expanse of water has remained largely untold. New research is telling us that more than 3,500 years ago, about the same time that the Egyptians were building the pyramids, our Polynesian ancestors set out across the Pacific Ocean from Southeast Asia. It took 5 centuries to make it as far as Tonga and Samoa. Then they took a big breather. The islands of the Pacific became smaller and further apart. They needed new knowledge and new technology to cross those bigger gaps. Our Polynesian tupuna had to invent blue water sailing and navigation. It took another 2,000 years to get from Samoa to Tahiti, but once they were there, these fearless sailors soon found the most isolated islands in the Pacific. They reached Hawaii about 1,000 years ago, Rapa Nui, Easter Island 800 years ago. They even got as far as the coast of South America. And how do we know that? The kumara. It's native to South America, and it's the only place it could have come from. Our tupuna brought it back to Polynesia, and about 750 years ago, down to Aotearoa. So the story of human migration, which began 65,000 years ago out of Africa, ended here, on the shores of Aotearoa. And the next step in that journey, well, it looks like it's back to the stars that brought us here in the first place.
And 60 million square kilometres. That's how big the Pacific Ocean is. Do you know how many rugby fields that is? Are you ready? 16 billion. That's 16 billion rugby fields full of water. And for thousands of years, my ancestors have been crossing all that water, finding new land, tiny little bits of land. How'd they do it? They created special groups of people called navigators. The Jedi Knights of their time. Just like Jedi Knights, they were trained from birth, and what they were taught was how to read the natural world around them, to read it so well that they could accurately cross the biggest ocean on the planet. They used the sun, the moon, and the stars. They used the ocean currents, swells, and clouds, and the movement of birds and whales and dolphins and fish, all to help them find pathways from island to island and back again. Today's navigators train the same way. They don't use machines and they don't ask Google. They use a star compass to memorize where the stars rise and set. So at night, out on the ocean, the sky itself becomes their map. Pretty Jedi Knight, right? But they don't use lightsabers and no one's gone to the dark side. In fact, this one over here is my dad. Kia ora Papa, thanks to you and to all the aunties and uncles for keeping the traditions and skills of the navigators alive and for being awesome. We're proud of your mahi.
Navigation, it's been around for at least 3,000 to 4,000 years. When our ancestors were coming across the Pacific and applying their trade and then becoming master waka builders and master navigators. The star compass, it's been with us since our ancestors started navigating. It's a tool that we're able to use and then later memorise so that we can understand where the rising and setting points of the sun, the moon and the stars all are. We have our 4 main points of north, south, east and west. In between them we have 7 different whare. Stars, they live in a whare, they live in a house, they stay in that whare, they rise in that whare, they'll set in a whare over the other side of the compass, but it's still got the same name of the whare. On a waka, you don't have any landmarks to be able to understand which direction you're going in. All you've got is whole 360 degrees of ocean. And so you need to somehow be able to break that horizon up so that you can understand which direction you go in. When you see that sun rising when you're on the waka, then whichever way your waka is facing, that's where you're calibrating your hand, you're working out how many houses, how many whare you are away from your particular mark that you've got on the horizon, whether it's stars, the sun or the moon. What you're really doing is you're stepping off the star compass and you're putting everything into your memory, into your hinengaro, so you can go anywhere after you've got all that memorised and understand which direction you're going at any time of the day or night.
When I look at that painting, I think, man, that's a massive crayfish. I'd trade a piece of cloth for that. But it's not the painting that's important, it's the person who painted it, Tupaia. Tupaia was a master navigator from this island, Raiatea, not far from Tahiti. And this is his marae, the famous Taputapu. Tupaia met Captain Cook over 250 years ago, right here in Matavai Bay. This is where he jumped on the Endeavour and sailed to Aotearoa. The sun, the stars, the sea, the wind, and the birds were all his ancestors. But understanding what they were saying and where they were leading him, that was his technology. Tupaia drew an amazing map with Cook before they left. Aotearoa isn't on it, maybe it was too far away. But for sure he knew it was south because 500 years earlier, 3 of our waka sailed from Raiatea to Aotearoa. When Tupaia arrived in Aotearoa with Cook, he was like, oh, I know what those Māori fellas are saying. Sounds like my language. And it was, because some of our tupuna had come from his place. Yo, Tupaia, it's only been 5 centuries, but we fully understand you, bro. Tupaia went all around Aotearoa with Cook, and by the end of it, Māori thought that Tupaia was the chief of the Endeavour, not Cook. Here, have this huge crayfish and give it to your mean-ass chief, the one who came back down from home for a visit. Kinda huge anyways. That spirit of Tupaia, of this clever, curious, bold, well-educated man, it's still in Māori and Pacifica today. All we have to do is look over the horizon, imagine what we want, and go out and get it.